Hey everybody, this week we are talking about leadership and we're talking about leading from inspiration instead of leading from fear. What we want to be doing is inspiring people. And the only way you can inspire people is if you're inspired, so coming out of your own inspiration. We want to be an encouragement and we don't want to lead out of fear. And fear is usually when we are afraid of the challenge ahead of us, or we've got a goal and we're scared, we're not sure we're going to meet it or not. We've got a dream so big it scares us. But we don't want to live out of that fear, and we're certainly not going to lead people or inspire them out of that fear. And what we're looking at is actually the story of David and Goliath. And most of you know the story of David and Goliath from the Bible. It's in 1 Samuel chapter 17. And the Israelite army was led by King Saul, even though he wasn't out there with them on the battlefield. And the Philistines had a champion named Goliath. He was 9 feet tall. He wore armor that was 125 pounds. He was a really big dude. And here's a 3 points today from this story on leading from inspiration instead of leading from fear. The first point is, if you as the leader are scared, everybody else is going to be scared. And what fear does, when you're scared, they're scared. And what fear does is it freezes everybody. So it says, we're in chapter 17, okay, with all these verses. And in verse 11, it says, when Saul, the king, and the Israelites heard this, and that's Goliath yelling at them, they were terrified and deeply shaken. So it started with Saul and then all the Israelites. Okay, it's a domino effect. And then we go to verse 16. So we've got two armies, Philistines and the Israelites, and they're standing kind of, there's a valley between them, and they're standing on each side, and they're just staring at each other. Well, verse 16 says it happened for 40 days, and every day Goliath comes out and taunts them. And, so what we say is, when you're scared, the team is scared, and when you're all scared, nothing happens. Everything stops. Everything freezes. There's no progress. So if you're wondering, why is my team not growing? Or why are my kids not growing? Why are my kids scared all the time? Or, why aren't we meeting our goals? Or, why can't I seem to get this thing to budge, right? I want to get movement here. A good chance is that you're not leading from inspiration and encouragement. You're leading from fear. Now, it doesn't mean that you're walking around telling people, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, but they are sensing that from you. They are feeling that from you, okay? So third point is perception is everything, okay? Perception is everything. So I'm not going to read them all, but write down these verses, verse 24 and 25, verse 28, verse 33, and 34 through 37, okay? So in verse 24 and 25, David comes on the scene. Goliath is finished taunting for the 40th time or whatever. And it says the people saw him and ran away, And they did this daily. I mean, it's insane. The Israelite people would like bang on their drums and go, woo, we're going to stand on the other side of the valley. And then Goliath comes out and says his thing, and then they run away. We're scared of Goliath. They've seen it every day. But every time they see it, it impacts them. So David goes around and he's like, I'm not seeing what you're seeing. Perception's everything. I'm not seeing what you're seeing. Like, what are you all so scared of? We've got God. And his brother, David's brother, sees David. David's brother sees in David something different than David sees in David, and then God sees in David. David's brother is also jealous. But anyway, David's brother is fearful. David's brother is leading from fear. But David's brother says, what about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? What about those 1 or 2 or 3 sheep? Like you don't even have an important job. So, I mean, who are you? He says, I know about your pride and deceit. You just want to see the battle. You're just a punk snotty-nosed little kid, right? So the perception the brother has of David is not high at all. That's true of Saul as well. Saul sees David because David says, I can take care of this. Saul says, there is no way, in verse 33, you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. Wow, that's leadership, right? That's inspiring. No, Saul is leading from fear. And most people that he said that to would take on Saul's fear. But praise God that David would not receive, the same perception that Saul had. So our third point is who are you watching and who's watching you? Who are you watching and who's watching you? So when we get to the very end of the chapter 17, verses 51 through 58, it says, when the Philistines, the bad guys, saw that their champion was dead, they turned and ran. Now this is so interesting because let's say the Philistines had the same number of people as the Israelites had. And one guy gets defeated. The big guy, sure, but one guy gets defeated. They put all their hope in that one dude. And as soon as he came down, they got scared. Who are you watching? Who's watching you? They were watching the wrong person, right? The Israelites, as soon as they saw Goliath go down, they chased after him. Well, that's a good thing, but they were watching the wrong person too. They should have been chasing after him long before Goliath died if they had had their eyes on God instead of Goliath. Now, it's interesting, at the very end of the chapter, Saul understands this point. Who are you watching? Who's watching you? He gets David to come to him, and he has just one question for David. If you've ever read this and really thought about it, then it should have made you pause and go, why is that the one thing that Saul asked? But Saul says in verse 58, hey, David, tell me about your father. Tell me about your father. Essentially what Saul is saying, hey, David, you're an impressive young man. You're incredible. You've got courage beyond anybody in the entire Israelite army. You see things differently. Everybody saw this and you saw that. What he asked him was, when he said, tell me about your father, he was saying, who have you been watching? Who have you been watching? So that's the question. Who have you been watching and who's watching you? Remember, from point one, if you're scared, they'll be scared. Everything freezes. Everything stops. There's no growth. Okay. Point two is perception is everything. So inspire and encourage and inspire and encourage and inspire and encourage. And if you want to inspire, you've got to be inspired. So who are you watching and who's watching you? All right. I hope that encouraged you guys today.